Welcome to Booktopia TV. I'm John Purcell, and I'm delighted to be here with Annabel Crabb, author of The Wife Drought. Welcome, Annabel.
John, it's a pleasure to be here.
The Wife Drought. What prompted you to write it?
Well, quite particularly what prompted me was I wrote a column about a year ago when Tony Abbott announced his cabinet and there was only one woman in it, so we fell into one of those traditional bouts of hand-wringing about why there aren't more women in federal politics. And I wrote a slightly snippy column saying, listen, one of the reasons that we don't talk about why there aren't more women in federal politics is that women in politics do not get the same sort of spouses that men in politics get, i.e. people who are prepared to really shoulder massive amounts of domestic responsibility and clear the way for their partners to go off and address themselves completely to their jobs for weeks and weeks on end. And I got this kind of torrent of communiques from mostly women elsewhere in all sorts of other fields saying, hey, it's not just politics. And that made me think, okay, well, what is the comparative rate of wife having in the Australian workforce? I.e., I define a wife as a spouse who works either part-time or not at all, and who is therefore equipped with the flexibility to kind of deal with a lot of the things in home life that can really tip you up as a working person.
So in the book you describe you and your husband not having, either of you having...
Neither of us has a wife, which is tragic.
So the wife within the wife drought isn't necessarily female. It's
No.
a concept, it's an
I
idea.
say wife because, housewife is a much more kind of familiar and accepted term. And also because if I had a buck for every time I've heard a woman say, what I really need is a wife, and it's a kind of like a joke, particularly among working women, I think. But it sort of isn't a joke, really, because it is. It's not just a nice thing to have a spouse who is there to let plumbers in and pick up kids and take lasagnas to Nana when she's sick and stuff like that. It's not just a nice thing to have. It's also a huge professional advantage. It's like an economic power pellet. To be able to walk out the door and know that your home life is kind of taken care of, or that someone is there looking after things while you turn your attention to your work is a great luxury, I think. And, that's what I think an under-evaluated area of inequality in the workplace. Because when I did finally find the numbers, the rate of wife having in Australia, with the help of a very, very kind researcher who came to my aid while I was desperately wrestling with the census results and going, wow, not very good at counting. She did the numbers for me and worked out that of working dads, and 90% of dads work, of full-time working dads, 76% of them have a spouse who either doesn't work or works part-time. But if you look at full-time working mums, only 15% of them have the same arrangement, So I think it's a real disparity,
Do you think equal pay, the fight for equal pay, will address some of it? If we actually eventuate it?
Not really. I think it's sort of like, it's a chicken and egg thing, to be honest. I mean, I think that because women tend to get paid less, I think they are much more likely, all this stuff starts to really hit home when men and women get together and have children, right?
Yeah.
That's when it really starts separating out. And what normally happens in Australia, even in our modern country, what overwhelmingly normally happens when a man and woman get together and have a baby is that the woman will change the way she works. Like take some time out and then maybe go back part-time or not at all for a few years and then part-time, and the father will almost invariably keep working exactly the way that he was working. And there's two ways of talking about this. Like, one way is to say, poor old women getting the rubber end of the plunger or whatever, but aren't men bastards and so on, but I don't think that's a very constructive or useful or really realistic way of talking about it. I think that a lot of these patterns are kind of bigger than individuals. They feel that way, particularly when people have babies and nobody knows what they're doing. Just like, what am I supposed to do now? That's what everybody else seems to be doing. I'll do that, We're as humans, we're so guided by what we see happening around us, particularly at junctures where we feel like idiots, like, new parents and so on. But so what happens then generally is a little bit influenced by the pay gap, I think, because the guy is, more likely to be earning more than the mum anyway. And in a weird way, it kind of, that process just strengthens the continuation of the pay gap as well.
What about with, because there's an education gap there too, because often women take the time off having just given birth and have the experience, the early experience of caring for the child, which then puts them ahead on that. And then they become the expert within the family on how to raise because of that particular...
And the next time they have another baby, then she's the expert. So, and look, this is one of the sad things, you know, I reckon, I mean, I don't argue at any point that men and women are identical and that, you know, given the same match conditions, they'd turn out the same. I don't think that's right at all. But I do think that our expectations about who will do what within a relationship are surprisingly old-fashioned for a country otherwise as evolved as Australia is. We have a really, really robust attachment to the male breadwinner model in Australia, much more so than other countries. And it's partly because, you know, we have a high rate of part-time work that's mainly women, and that's been the big shift in the last half a century, is women moving into the workforce into part-time work, like housewives going into part-time work is the big shift. So, you know, I think when we follow those patterns, men are the losers as much as women are. Like we pay a lot of attention to what goes wrong for women at work and why women don't get to certain levels of the workplace. And partly I think it's because they're often competing against men who have wives, you know, whereas they're doing, you know, all of that stuff and going a little bit crazy at the same time. That sort of superwoman juggling thing is a very female kind of scenario. But I think that we don't pay anywhere near enough attention to the barriers that face men as they try and get out of the workplace. Like,
there are a lot of social barriers. I mean, there's a lot of... You look like you're not doing the full amount. If you've got a single male or another male with a wife, and you're deciding to opt out and leave.
Oh, I've got to leave at 3:30 to pick up my kid or something. You know, there's some really interesting research which shows that men who take time, you know, who leave work early to pick up their kid or whatever, get more blowback than women do, because women are kind of more expected to fit their work around their family and to work more flexibly. It's not unusual for women to ask for flexible work, but it's still it's still comparatively unusual for men to do so. And I think men have a lot of, you know, there are a lot of complicated issues there about, you know, not wanting to seem uncommitted, wondering what their friends would say, wondering what their colleagues would say. And I think that, you know, I think that's a bit of a tragedy. You know, there should be more freedom of choice for men to have the same sort of flexibility as women have kind of come to expect, I guess, over the last few decades.
Well, I'm very pleased with this book. I really want a lot of men to read.
I hope so too.
And I think they will, because it's actually an encouragement to do a lot of things they want to do. Like they want to have more time and they want to have more access to their family and to take some of the load up. And I think they're just trying to find ways to do it. And this gives you at least some kind of talking point and discussion point to begin that.
Oh, well, I hope so. I think that when people retreat into their trenches in the gender wars, you know, it's not very productive, and people get their hackles up really easily. And I think, you know, all people kind of feel constrained by expectations on them to some degree. It's not just women, and I hope lots of men read it too. Thank you for being a happy male customer.
Thank you very much for coming into Booktopia.
A pleasure.
Annabel's new book, The Wife Drought, is available from booktopia.com.au right now.